Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
I am so ready to go. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Well, we're recording, so we're going.
Oh, yes, that's what she said. That's what the little voice from the computer said. So ready or not, here we are. Happy Tuesday, everyone. We're fine. We're just, we had a busy weekend, a great weekend. Let's talk about that a minute, Dan, after I say officially welcome to the MuseCast. And we are so glad that you're here. You know him, that's Dan Kent. I'm Shawna Boren. And every week we come to you and we are just continuing the conversation from Sunday's sermon. And we do a few other little things, We do many things. So, yeah. So, you don't want to miss it. Dan, we did have a very busy weekend. Have you recovered? I mean, it was all good stuff, but were you a little tired yesterday, or how are you feeling? And I know you've got some stuff coming up, so you're probably already looking forward. So give us an update on Dan.
Yeah. Well, hey, I mean, it was so fun seeing everybody. And every time we do the picnic thing, in the Covenant Partners meeting, we get people who travel in. And so it was fun to meet people and a couple MuseCast fans, talking about how the MuseCast has sort of helped their faith. And that always is good. I'm a little tired because Monday, we have meetings all day Monday.
Yeah.
And so I can't wait until, let's see, my break. I'll get a break tomorrow in the morning. So I'm going to just sleep in tomorrow and looking forward to that. But tonight, I got to tell you, I'm I get to do a little teaching at SEM.
Fun.
Which is our seminary for everybody kind of program here at the church, and really looking forward to that. And then I have a class after that. So I'm going to be teaching like from 5:30, and then that gets done at 7. And then from 7 to 8:30, I'm teaching the last of my 6-week class on apologetics. And so I'm going to be giving my argument for what am I arguing? Oh yeah. I'm defending the gospel, the historicity of the gospel. So really excited about that. So yeah, very full plate, but it's all fun stuff, and it's a good time. How about you? Have you recovered and ready to get back at it?
I think so. It was a wonderful weekend. So for those of you who maybe are like, what the heck happened this weekend? We had our big our annual, I should say, covenant partner meeting. We have it this particular meeting once a year, and it's where we all renew our vows, our commitment to be covenant partners, and also welcome in new covenant partners. And it was the first year where we had opened up covenant partnership to those who were not local. And so it was really amazing. I mean, literally Germany, Colorado, Iowa, parts of Minnesota that aren't within the Twin Cities, Canada, just people from all over, Oregon. Yeah, as I'm just like thinking through all the places, it was just so cool. So these are folks that are connected to Woodland Hills. They have been engaged in Woodland Hills and invested from afar. And so they've been given the opportunity to say, like, officially, I want to be a part of this. And they did. And that was just so cool, so amazing. It was really great to hear kind of the things that we've done as a community this past year and what we're looking to lean into this next year. So I love it. It was a great weekend. And then, like you said, we have a ton of meetings on Mondays. And then I think after my final meeting, I had to just like walk outside. I just needed to see the outdoors. Like I just needed nature in my life because it was a bit of a doozy. But and then last night the Lakers played, and that's always a later game. And oh my goodness, it was happy. It was good. But so looking forward to the year to come, and really happy to be here with you today, Dan. And I feel like we should get moving because I didn't realize all of the things you had tonight coming up.
Oh yeah.
And I have heard amazing things about your class because I have a few from gathering groups who are like, hey, for 6 weeks, we're going to have to leave early to head over to Dan's class. And I'm like, that's perfect. Please do so. It's going to be worth it.
It's interesting that you say that because I feel I've been so rusty. Like there's some of these things that I used to just know secondhand. I don't remember. Like I have a slide and I look at it, I'm like, what was I thinking with this? And I'm sure that's what most people think about my slides, but like, no. So yeah, it's but I can't do my sermon until I at least acknowledge just the beautiful dominance of the Lakers over Golden State. I mean,
I know.
Shawna, that game this weekend, I think it was like 604-12 was the final score. It was insane. Then I thought, okay, well, Golden State's going to bounce back and win the next one big.
For sure.
They didn't. And they did bounce back, but they didn't bounce far enough because they still lost. And so the Lakers, wow, they look great. So
looking
good for you.
Looking good. It's very fun. Yeah. I have to temper my excitement because I keep telling myself, okay, next game, because Golden State's a good team. I'm not going to, they're the defending champs. So,
totally.
You know, I fully expect them to like come at us, like I'm a part of the team.
Own it.
They're going to come at us hard and we got to be ready. But yeah, it's been super fun. I love it. So good.
Yeah.
Really good. So we're going to go to Greg and his sermon, and it's called Church Scandal, but he called it the Church Scandal. And then I heard someone say scandalous church, and I'm like, oh dear Lord, what is going on?
Yeah. It's all of that. It's all of that. So it was a good message. It's interesting, like how different messages hit different people, but like a couple people shared it on Facebook, and they felt like it really helped with their own struggles with the church, and so I was very happy to see that. And that's sort of what this series is meant to do, is to help people who have different kind of intellectual or emotional struggles with faith, and so in that way, the sermon was perfect for our series. But basically, this is what he asked. It wasn't even an ask. He was more really, the way he said it is, I think, how did he say it? He said something like, I'm going to process this in public, is sort of what he's saying. So this is his own kind of struggle and frustration, but he feels like the hardest obstacle to Christian faith is the church, and in particular, the church's failure to love over the many years that the church has been around. And so it's just this weird thing, like, why does God choose to do his infinite divine plan through such fallible people who just have a really bad habit of failing? And so, you know, Greg kind of notes that God's ideal for his church, what God is calling his church to be, is to be this humble, other-oriented, self-sacrificial, enemy-loving people that serves as a model for the rest of the world. And we've just failed miserably to display any of those features, either humility, other-orientedness. We tend to be very self-centered. We tend to have this profound inability to sacrifice things, but rather we tend to hoard things. And we tend to make enemies instead of embracing enemies. And so it just seems like on every level, the church fails. And it's really hard to see this as God's presence in the world, as God's ambassadorship in the world. And what does this say about the God that this group of people is supposed to represent? And so that's the struggle that Greg sort of articulates, and he does it in a lot more depth than obviously I'm doing in the sermon here. But then he offers three kind of considerations that helps him in the face of this kind of struggle, this obstacle. The first of the three considerations is just to remember that God is infinitely intelligent. And so just to trust that whatever the church does, whatever failings people have, God is never caught off guard. And no matter how much of a mess the church becomes, God has a plan in place to kind of respond to that mess. And what that means is that even when the church in the short run might seem like it's defeated or it's losing or whatever, in the long run, we can trust that God has a plan to bring even these short-term failures to ultimate victory. The second consideration is simply that to remember that God has always historically used the foolish things and the weak things in the world to accomplish his will. And he shares 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 27-31, where it says that God uses the foolish and the weak things to overthrow the powerful or to shame the powerful, and so forth. And in other words, God's power is almost always displayed in what God does through the weak things of the world. And God's wisdom has always been shown through how God works through things that seem foolish to the world. And so that's a good thing to consider as we're looking at this issue. And then finally, the third thing to remember is that we are first fruits. We are supposed to be kind of role models for what God wants to do here. And that's really hard, because it's really hard to be different in that way. It's really hard to stand out, because we tend to want to be like those around us. We tend to want to kind of like fit in. And this goes all the way back to, Leviticus and Exodus, and the people just wanted to be like all the other nations. And God sets up all of these things to be set apart, to be different, to be kind of like the plumb line that everyone else should go to. Instead of always trying to be like the world, we want to be something that the world strives to become more like. And so we are first fruits. And the idea there is that, when we have a crop, sometimes you'll get the fruit. Well, you get fruit that ripens before all the other fruits do. And so historically, what the church would do, or what Israel would do, is they would take those first fruits, those first ripened fruits, and they would consecrate that, or they would give that to God as an act of trust that the rest of the harvest will come. And James and the Apostle John both point to that phenomenon as a reflection of what the church is like. We should strive to be that. We should strive to be those first fruits that trust that God will eventually bring the rest of the harvest. And so with those three considerations, Greg proposes that helps us with the fact that, boy, the church is nothing like what the New Testament seems to call the church to be. How do you deal with that? And that's what Greg proposes. And so what did you think of the sermon?
Yeah, good summary, Dan. So for me, this was one of those that I was like, oh yeah, this is my question. This is my issue. And I think we've discussed a lot of different questions, concerns, wonderings throughout the series, but this is the one that, at least in my circles and in my life, I keep coming back to. And I loved how Greg started us out like, hey, this is something I'm working out in real time. Yeah. And how long has he been a believer? Not only a believer, but a pastor, a leader, a teacher. And so I feel like those of us who have these wanderings are in good company. So way to go. But I love how he showed us a glimpse of the relationship with his dad. We all know, and you've taught a class on Letters from a Skeptic, and the question that his dad asked was so beautiful. So I want to just quick read it, because this is at the core of what Greg was talking about. How could an all-powerful, all-loving God allow his church to do so much harm to humanity for so long? Isn't this supposed to be his true church, his representation on earth? And I think that it's like, man, God is beautiful and wonderful, and Jesus, the Son of God, one part of the Trinity is glorious, but man, his people, and I am in that camp, are just a bunch of bozos sometimes. Like we've just done some harmful things, and we've said some harmful things. And I'm not going to say that it was with ill intent. I think many people have a good heart and they're trying to serve God the best they can. And we do get it quite wrong. Historically, presently, so this is one of my big questions, but I really love how Greg said that God is disappointed, because I'm sure this wasn't his intent for the church, but he is not caught off guard. Yeah. So I can imagine him being like, ugh, you guys, are kind of missing the point again, kind of missing the mark again, and for him to have a plan for that. In the end, we know victory is his. In the end, we know all of the things will be defeated that need to be defeated that isn't like him. But an important question we need to ask of the church, and by the church, I mean us, we are the church. An important question we need to ask is, to what degree do we reflect the kingdom? The others-oriented, self-sacrificial, humble, enemy love, that we are supposed to display. How well are we doing that? And I don't think it's a question that we ask ourselves one time. It's a question that we have to continually ask ourselves. We need to continually check ourselves to see how we're doing, because it's always a process. And we may, hopefully, we'll find that there are days that we're doing great, and then we'll catch ourselves when we're not. And so I say all of that to say that I really did appreciate this sermon. It was really good to, because for me, it felt like he was really putting some concrete words to some of the things that I feel when I come across people and they ask, are you a Christian? Or if you have to, like, for whatever reason, make some sort of affiliation. I'm like, let's talk about what you mean by that word. And I've done that for years. I think even as far back as when I first created a Facebook profile, like they asked, like, what political party are you? And I was like, neither. And what, what religion are, and I was like, I love Jesus, because it can get super murky. And unfortunately, the identity of Christ follower doesn't mean the same across the board. So I don't want to stop a potential conversation from happening before it has time to start. And the last thing I'll say is people, and I'm going to mainly I've got 4 teenagers, and, my teenagers have friends, and those friends have questions. And typically it's not necessarily how could God, it's more like how could people who are supposed to represent God do A, B, C, D, E, F, D. Those are the kind of things that I'm hearing. And so I really appreciated the sermon from that perspective.
Yeah, that's great. I can't believe you have 4 teenagers.
I do.
I'm really weird, and partly it's probably because I don't have kids, but I always forget that the people in my life have kids. And so that's amazing. I don't know how you do that. That's like I
don't know how either. No, yeah, I can't. It's great.
I can't even manage houseplants, and I can't even imagine that. So that's.
Well, it is great because I always have a perspective to look back on, right? I always I know what I'm feeling, experiencing, learning, but it's great to look back at what's coming up generationally behind me and what questions do they have and what are they struggling with. And so in that respect, it's been really helpful. I love having conversations with our kids about what did you hear in this sermon and what do you think? And like I told you, our daughter, who's our youngest, she had the science questions. And so she was really tuning into your sermon when you did that about science. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit trail, but I think it's important. These are some real questions and some real issues that people are having and real hindrances to fully leaning into the faith. And I think it's great that we're talking about it and, shining a spotlight on these things.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, that's good. I've never really thought about this first fruits kind of analogy. Yeah. And so I've been kind of chewing on that, no pun intended. So I've been kind of thinking about that, what does that mean? And part of it is just the trust in the rest of the harvest. And and I guess at my age, and we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but kind of where I'm at in my life, I guess, and how long I've been a believer, I really care about the obstacles that people have in their faith, for sure. But at the same time, I do trust that there will be a harvest, because I do think that the obstacles are not. This is a heartbreaking one. The fact that the church is failing to be what God wants it to be, that's sort of a heartbreaking obstacle. But like all the other ones, like the science obstacle and the problem of evil and the, meaning in life and all of these types of things, I trust that what the Spirit has and what we have in Christ and kind of the arguments and the evidence that we have that Jesus is who the Gospels say he is. I mean, all of that stuff is so profound and fulfilling that I do have this kind of inherent assumption that eventually people will be won over to that, because the alternative, a godless world, it cannot have meaning. And even if science succeeds at whatever it wants to succeed at, it can't overcome the second law of thermodynamics. The world is still running out of energy. The universe is still running out of energy, and there will eventually be a heat death. There is no escape from death in the universe. And so there are these inherent constraints on what science by itself can do. And so for me, like, and maybe this is, I'm kind of just reflecting live on the spot here, but maybe this is kind of how I have responded to the problem that Greg is talking about. But like, how can you continue to be a part of a church that has fallen so far below what God's expectation for that church has been? And I think my answer to that, and maybe this would be a number 4 to add to Greg's list of 3 considerations, is simply that the alternative is so hollow and empty to me. It just seems so vacuous that even with all of the church's failings, I feel like what the church offers, the theology, the faith, is profoundly, euphorically better than the alternative. And I think that's what I've kind of keep coming back to in my faith and life.
Yeah, that's really good, Dan. And I want to circle back to how you started your reflection. You brought up the first fruits, and I am really thankful that that was one of his considerations, because the first fruits is something I only ever heard in terms of finances. And so
Wow.
that's a whole nother, but yeah.
That's interesting though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So to reframe that a bit, it actually gives me hope in the church to say there is a remnant. There is, however small, there is this first batch that is trying to show the way of the kingdom to other humans here on earth. And it helps me not to be so down on us as humanity and us in the church, and rather, no, there are those that are really trying to reflect the kingdom. And to tie it back to personally for us this weekend, like, it is so great to encounter other brothers and sisters across the country and really across the world, because they are from other countries as well, who are like, yes, I hear this kingdom message, and yes, I want to move forward with that, and I want to be a part of it. And so I think, yeah, there is many things that we could look at and go, whoa, we are really lousing it up. But there are also things that we can look at and go, yes, that is kingdom right there. That is self-sacrificial. That is others-oriented. That is humble. That is enemy loving. And so it's good to focus on that and not just on, the negative stuff. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That was really helpful to me.
Good. Well, good. Yeah. But that was totally on the spot too. I'm like,
that's all right. That's okay. That's good. Are you kind of feeling like you have, we're not going there just yet, because I do have a question for you, but are you feeling like you would have a nugget for today? I just want you to remember that we got, okay, good.
Yeah. You have me so thoroughly conditioned that I know that something will come up by the time we get there. So yeah.
Perfect. All of my training and all of my scheming has worked. I want to ask you, now I have to remember what my question was. You're going to have to filibuster for a moment.
Well, I have should I show you an item?
Yes, okay, absolutely. Because I did want to say to you that we did have a comment on the YouTube channel that someone thought it was really cool, the glasses that you showed last week.
Oh yeah.
And the meaning of those. Yeah. So they commented on that they thought that was really cool. So I think, let's do a show and tell from Dan's library shelf.
I'm going to go, let's see. I'm going to do this. Okay, so you can think of your question. I'm going to share this. This is a postcard, and you see there's 2 ghosts there, and one of them says, "Ugh, this coffee goes right through me." And that's the Postcard. Now, what that's from is in 2011, I used to really like the New Yorker. You're laughing.
Well, I'm supposed to be thinking and trying to remember. And you shut up. I can't. Okay, we're good.
Okay. Well, let me explain this. So in 2011, I really liked the New Yorker has this caption contest in the back of the magazine, and there's 3 empty there's cartoons, but there's no words, and so you have to put the caption for the cartoon. And I loved that. I thought that was brilliant, and I thought that'd be really cool if there was a website where you could do that, where every day there's a new picture, and then everybody contributes a punchline for it. And so I looked. I'm like, I need someone to build this website for me. So I went to a programming business, and I said, this is my idea. How much would that cost? And he's like, well, we could probably do it for 100. I'm like, $100? That's great. No, it's $100,000. I'm like, okay, forget this. It's not that important. But Shawna, it was that important. I wanted this caption contest website. So I learned how to program and I thought I could figure programming out in a weekend. No, it took like 9 months, and I finally learned how to program. I built this website. It was called Giggle Trigger, and it was so much fun, but it didn't really have enough traffic to sustain it. But I did get a couple of cartoons out of it that I really liked, and this is one of them. So that is my item.
First of all, I love that item. I love that postcard, and let everyone mark your bingo cards, because to Dan's entrepreneurial career, we're going to add web developer and programmer.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I built Giggle Trigger was the name of the site, which I just loved the name.
Super cute. Trigger. I love it. Yeah.
And then I built another one for writing, but then after that, I'm like, no, it's not for me. So I stopped. So it was about a year where I was programming, but it was a fun adventure.
Oh, always a delight, Dan. Seriously. Always a delight. Okay, so even despite you distracting me, because I was supposed to be trying to remember, and then you show that funny card and I almost lost it. Okay. This is what I wanted to ask you about. At Woodland Hills, one of the things that we talk about is being Jesus-centered and really trying to not get pulled into the different polarities, and just like there is this third way, and we kind of are trying to follow that way of Jesus. We're not experts, but it's just kind of what we strive to do. So we're not trying to get pulled into either camp or any camp, and we're really trying to follow Jesus. But it does seem as if other believers and many even other churches have kind of, and this ties back to what I was saying last week about for some, I think Christendom is alive and well because they're like putting a stake in the ground and like, we are going to stand for this and fight for this no matter what. Some people seem to be really like staunchly planted in their camps. And we're among a group of people, a group of churches that are trying to say, let us not do that. And so this isn't a case of just agreeing to disagree, but how do you see this playing out, Dan? Like, how are we striving to not get pulled into some of these issues that cause folks to say, if that's what the church is about, no, thank you. And is it possible to truly find this different approach, this third way approach, and try to follow that? And how is that different than just agree to disagree and then not try to fellowship with one another? That's a doozy.
Yeah, it's a doozy. And I feel like I kind of get the question, but I kind of don't. So if you could just in terms of the ditches, like which ditches are you talking about there?
So if we look at polarizing issues, I know in America, it feels like the church has definitely gotten co-opted into the politics of our country.
Oh, right.
And so you can look at right-left polarization. Yeah. You can look at any hot button topic, and there's typically a right-left about it. And the church has really either gone right or left. I'm just going to use right-left. Because we could talk about it a couple of different ways. At Woodland Hills, we're like, oh, let's not do right, left. Let's try to find this other way, this Jesus-looking way that is different. Yeah. At the same time, we're not saying we're right, you're wrong, we're agreeing to disagree, so we can't fellowship. We're saying, no, let's all try to come together, respect and honor one another, but understand that we're trying to do this differently. So is that possible? And if so, what hope does that give you for the church? Maybe that's a better way to ask it.
Right. Yeah. Well, not only do I think it's possible, I think it's the only hope that we have. And so I'd say, yes, it's possible. It's the only hope we have. And not only is it possible, and not only is it the only hope we have, I think it is inevitable. I think it's inevitable that we will I'm very optimistic about us getting out of, even though it looks right now the worst it's ever been. I also see the futility of it. It's just so profoundly self-injurious and futile that I think eventually enough people will burn out on the euphoria that you get by creating tribes and being affiliated with one side in the culture war, and there are good feelings about being part of a movement against this thing that I disagree with, but at the same time, it's absolutely fundamentally futile, and it leads to, in my opinion, a lot of really ridiculous kind of beliefs. But you end up having to embrace these things that deep down you think are ridiculous, but that's what my side thinks, and I don't want to be cast off from my group, and so I'm going to continue to believe these ridiculous things, and that's bound to fail eventually. It's just a matter of when, and so I'm optimistic that it will. Then the second part of that gives me optimism is that, especially when it comes to the politics stuff, and this is my own opinion, and so people disagree, that's fine. All politics is dealing with questions on how should we manage ourselves as a people. And so, the right wants to manage the country in a certain way. The left wants to manage the country in a certain way. And so really, when it comes down to is these differences are about managing people. And Christianity is about becoming the type of people that don't need to be managed. It's just fundamentally different. It's a bigger kind of move. It asks bigger questions that make these other questions ultimately irrelevant. And then the other thing I would say, and this is the last thing I'd say about it, is that what Christianity is calling us into is deeper, more meaningful connection, relationship. And all of the issues that politics brings up, whether it's warfare, whether it's crime, whether it's abortion, whatever, all of the issues are different when those issues pertain to somebody that you are in a close relationship with. And you're going to deal and process those things differently when you're in a close relationship with them. When it's abstracted and it's not people in your relationship, you're going to deal with it differently. But that type of posture toward others, that unrelated, abstract, distant, that is bound to fail because you can't sustain that. We were made for connection. We were made for relationship. And eventually those distant kind of abstracted kind of postures that people have, that's the sign of an unripened fruit. And eventually you'll see the failure of that, and you will ripen and you will enter into close relationship. That's what part of my confidence in the fact that we are the first fruits and the rest of the harvest will in fact ripen is trusting that that's the case. And so a lot of scattered thoughts there, but that's what gives me comfort and hope.
No, this is what I love, Dan. Even though it may take us a minute for me to get to the question at hand of what I want you to like, I love when you go exactly where I hope you go. Cool. And again, people, we don't discuss this stuff before. No. So it could go horribly awry, and that's okay. But yeah, But I am hopeful at your optimism. Because I think naturally I'm more of a pessimist than you. So I thank you for your optimism. And not only optimism, so you answered the question. Yes, you think it's possible. Yes, you are hopeful for it. And you went so far as to say you think it's inevitable. So that's pretty impressive. And if you think of where we are today as the church as a whole, and
we're a long ways away from it.
We're a long way, but I like the hopeful encouragement from you and getting back to those first fruits. There is a harvest coming. Yeah. We may not fully understand how or when, but it is there and it is coming, and we just have to stay the course. So that's right. I love it. Good job.
Amen.
Which leads us perfectly into
nugget time. Woo!
Nugget time. All right, Dan, take her away.
Well, and the nugget is related. I think that, when you're the biggest danger that I see when people are assessing church and assessing Christianity is productizing it and treating church in the same way that you treat buying a new laptop and looking for its features and what advantages does an Apple computer have over a Dell or something like that. And
So
that
many.
type of yeah, it does. That's true. But that type of posture, you're never going to have the kind of transformational, fulfilling experience with faith if you are viewing it like a product. I believe that. The second part of that is when you have that posture, you're always going to be looking at the weaknesses of the church as the weaknesses of the church, as something distinct from you. But I believe that the church is just people. That's all it is. The church is just the label that we give for this relationship of people. So whatever flaw you see there is a simultaneous flaw in yourself. Because if there's something that the church is lacking, what are you doing? That's an opportunity for you to go and make that better. That's why the church has many parts. The body of Christ has many parts that have many different things. And so if the church is missing something that you think is important, like whatever you think the church is lacking, the fact that you recognize that is an indicator. It might even be the Holy Spirit telling you that the church needs you. And so that's where, but when you view it as a product, then you don't view it as your responsibility. That's not that the church is letting me down. The church is failing me. Well, maybe that's true, but maybe also you're missing out on an opportunity to bless the church and to bless the world with your own gifts and with your own skills. And so whenever I hear people complain about the church, a lot of times the complaints are founded, but I think they need to be taken with a grain of salt also, because the church is just people, and whatever we're missing, we need people to fix. And so leaving the church isn't the answer. Well, it is an answer, but it's not a very good answer. So that's my nugget.
I like it, Dan. I'm going to tag onto your nugget because it ties perfectly into mine. And I'm going to make a qualifying statement just because I know there will be someone that will go, well, what about? And so I want to deal with that. What about? I love when you said at the end of your nugget about we are the church is its people. And if there is an issue in the church, guess what? We could be a part of that issue. And if we see a wrong in the church, what are we doing to help right that wrong or be what's missing, the missing ingredient in that equation? And I think I stand by all of that. I think it's great. I would say, however, if you find yourself in a church situation that is highly dysfunctional, abusive, unhealthy, get the heck out and find a different community to be a part of. So that goes hopefully without saying, but we said it just in case.
That's right.
I just really want to get back to the fact that we are individual people that are connected to one another, and we have the opportunity, the invitation to be those first fruits. And so if you're not seeing around you the type of kingdom believer that you feel like you should be seeing, just focus on being that type of kingdom believer that you are supposed to be, that influence, be that missing ingredient, similarly to what Dan was saying. Be what it is that you're not seeing. Show that to people. And that's really all that we can do. I cannot control anyone around me. I cannot. I can't make them act and behave in certain ways. I just can't do that. All I can do is try to be the best Jesus follower that I can be, and be honest with myself about these kingdom characteristics of being others oriented, self-sacrificial, loving, and humble, and embracing enemies instead of othering my enemies. That's all I can do, is strive to like lean into those waters, and hopefully there will be others that see that and are impacted. And honestly, my personal prayer is that for those in my life who have seen the dysfunction of the church, the people of the church, who have seen abuse, who have seen some horrible teachings, that they would see enough of the first fruits to say, okay. Then I see a reflection of who God is, and that I want to embrace. So
yeah,
that's
Amen.
That's that nugget.
That's awesome.
All right, Dan, where should people send questions if they have them?
Well, there should be an email address right here.
Woo, there you go.
I think it's MuseCast@whchurch.org.
Bingo.
We'll see if that's right, but
that is correct. Hopefully it's listed correctly. How can people tune into the MuseCast, Dan?
That's 4:00 on YouTube. 4
Mhm.
p.m. is when we do the broadcast, and Shawna and I will both be chatting in the little chat window, and usually Mr. Green is in there and a whole host of other
it's a fun group.
Basically, yeah, that's right. Yes, it totally. So think tank. So
and then one other pop quiz question: if someone can't get to YouTube, do they have to miss out on the MuseCast, or is there another way for them to hear us?
There is another way. Just send a self-addressed stamped envelope to
Oh my gosh. We will send a carrier pigeon.
Yeah, that's right. No, we're on a podcast. We're on a podcast. Yes.
We are. We are so what, Dan? Hip now
with it. Wow. That's hey, by the way, that's not me. That's I think Dan Cole. That's where I got that from.
Okay.
So
okay. Yeah. Well, I'm giving you credit because
thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, we're gonna sign off, guys. Thank you so much for another great time of engaging in conversation and chatting. And we will see you guys next week. Keep tuning in on Sundays because the conversation is just gonna keep rolling along. Have a great week, you guys.